all of you. I'm Dr. Jesse. I direct the writing program, and several of my colleagues from the program here. I wanted to start the introduction today by showing you a prehistoric artifact. That is, this is an English 101 portfolio from Illinois State in 1992. And one of the things that's prehistoric about it, some of you are way too young to remember this, but others of you will. Who remembers dot matrix printing? Okay. And of course, this is for dot matrix printing. This is pretty dark stuff. The other thing that some of you will have no recollection of, this paper is serrated at the bottom because the way the printers worked was you loaded these big stacks of accordion fold stuff in, and there you were. So I thought of this, and I was actually looking around for a 5 1/4 floppy drive, and I just couldn't find one of those at my office, but I did find this portfolio. Back in the mid-1980s, certainly before then, but by the mid-1980s, people were really starting to get interested in what the prospects were for computers and writing. I came to Illinois State University in 1986, at the same time that Gail Haberscher did, and we put together a 10 classroom writing lab. And each computer was hooked to its own dot matrix printer, period. There was no such thing as networking. And I remember those days, we spent a lot of time, we were using WordStar 3.1, and since I had just come from a place where it was WordStar 1.1, this is an amazing technological advance. But should we use that or Volkswriter? You remember these things. Bank Street Writer, Writer's Workbench. I mean, there's a whole detritus of software decisions in the late 1980s. And I remember, I was talking to Mike a little earlier today about when we got the Douglas software, all of a sudden we were networked and we could do these synchronous chats with other people also online at the same time. For those of you who are really young, it was like sort of cumbersome pre-instant messaging. But in any case, there was a lot of interest in computers and writing then, and certainly now, and accelerating now. But of course, the world has changed a lot since these kinds of things. All of this is preamble to our talk today, the title of which is Reload, Reset, Reboot. DOS commands that some of you probably don't even remember, I've never seen. Rethinking the role of computers in writing instruction. And we're really fortunate to have Mike Palmquist. I can think of very few people in the country who are able to think through these kinds of changes with us over the years. Professor Palmquist is Professor of English and Director at, University Distinguished Teaching Scholar at Colorado State University, just up the road in Fort Collins, where he also directs the university's Institute for Learning and Teaching. Roughly, but not quite the same counterpart as our CTL here. Mike also co-directs the Center for Research on Writing and Communication Technologies. His extensive publications include, among his books, The Bedford Researcher, Designing Writing, Transitions, Teaching Writing in Computer-Supported and Traditional Classrooms, Writing with the Computer, and others. His essays have appeared in Computers and Composition, Written Communication, Kairos, lots of editing collections. As significantly or more, I think, are the powerful contributions he's made to online writing environments, computer environments, digital environments generally. He's the developer of writing at CSU, the University of Online Writing Center. He's the founding editor of Academic Writing and edits the Black Clearinghouse, which is hands down the most robust set of resources in writing across the curriculum, writing in the disciplines online anywhere. For his extensive contributions in these areas, he received the 4Cs, 7Cs Technology Innovator Award. He's one of the premier scholars in technology and writing, and we're awfully lucky to have him with us here today. Michael Palmquist.
While you were saying that, I remember the first time I ever gave a talk, which was at the Penn State conference when I was a second-year grad student. And I remember standing in front of about 5 people, and the paper was literally. I feel just like that right now. so kind. I'm going to try not to spill my water. I think I just did it. I was trying to think of an interesting title, and you're right, those are all Doust commands. It doesn't make Doust anymore, do it? I really want to talk a little bit about how it's going to be a little bit about what we did at Colorado State, a little bit about the kind of thinking process that's led me personally to say, I don't think we're doing this the right way, and we have to try something new. That's not to say that we're doing it the wrong way, just that there are other right ways that we might not consider. We'll start out with this part, kind of leading out a problem statement, and then I'll do it over the rest of the talk. So let's start out with this. I want to ask you if this sounds familiar. I was doing some research in, I was actually doing a history of computer support for writing across the curriculum and writing schools. And I came across this article or this thing that was in the Writing Lab newsletter. So the keen interest in computers was evident at the entire 1983 Conference on College Composition and Communication and at other recent conferences. Before jumping on the Apple wagon, we should seriously consider our goals and objectives of writing instruction and then see how the computer can be used to attain some of these goals. In other words, our curriculum should not change simply because of a new toy. That's the earliest mention that I can find of what I've seen as a mantra in our field since I started. I joined the field in 1986 when I became a grad student. Before that, I'd been a professional writer. On my business card, it had word processing capabilities. Seriously, maybe. The basic argument then is never let the technology drive your teaching the students, right? Just because you've got Word doesn't mean you're going to teach within limits of Word. Or just because you have a word processor doesn't mean you start taking a class and treating the word processing class. Just because you've got access to chat doesn't mean you suddenly, you only use those things if it meets your teaching goals, right? So that's been the mantra. That's what I've heard years and years and years. Oops. Alas. I don't buy it anymore. I think there's a lot of truth to it, but I think it's more complicated than that. Of course, other people have said this as well. But we've been so true to this idea that we shouldn't let the technology drive our design. We kind of overlook some things. These new technologies actually make possible new ways of thinking about language. They make possible new ways of thinking about the relationship between readers and writers, genre conventions, about how we teach, what we teach, and so on. So if we're always thinking inside of our 19th century box about how we teach writing, then where do we go? What value are these new technologies? We're just grafting them onto an old way of thinking. So I think we have a problem. We stopped developing new tools in the 1980s as a field. If you look at today's word processor, you look at all these review things and all of the commenting tools there, even down to the level of integrating graphics into word processing tools, that came largely out of computers and writing group. Not simply within English, because there were other people like Jonathan Smith and Cognitive Psychology who were doing different writing environments in the 1980s. A lot of that stuff came out because people were developing new tools. I mean, frankly, the writing word processors that we had in the 1980s were very poor. So people in our field were developing really important things, and they made huge contributions to the shape of today's word processor. And you can trace some of this stuff right back to Nancy Kaplan, Chris Newman, any number of other people, Jonathan Smith. So what happens today? So we start developing the software. That's the problem. Today we buy software off the shelf. It's in a box, and we think inside that box. Isn't that clever? So we've integrated off-the-shelf software into a pre-existing conceptual framework. I was saying before, we're thinking about how we teach. We take the software, it goes inside, and we're not thinking about the real problem and the real possibilities. So at least that's my thinking so far. So what does this mean? By thinking inside the box, we're treating technology as an add-on. Okay, so curriculum comes first, all the things we deal with as writing teachers comes first. The technology comes in to help us accomplish. It makes sense. Most of us think this way. And I thought this way for a long time. Don't feel bad. And it's a very transparent thing. Well, it's just a word process, so we don't even think of it as technology anymore, right? But wow, that's technology. Basically. Okay. What I really think this means is we're not thinking about technology as anything that's transformative. It's not challenging us as teachers. It's not challenging us as writers. We just take what we got. We go with it. We do our same things. We're not thinking outside the box. There's all kinds of people who think outside the box, and many of you are probably in that boat in this room. So I'm not trying to put people down. I'm just saying I see this as a problem that as many of us as teachers tend to be. Okay, so my take is that privileging existing pedagogical goals over the possibilities privileged by new technology is a bad thing. It's limited the impact of those technologies now with each writing because we haven't taken advantage of some new possibilities. But I think this is bad when we think of technology as an add-on. I think we need to look at technology just as critically as we look at a new piece of fiction. We look at a new nonfiction writer. We look at a new piece of theory and say, what does this mean? What do we think what's going on? When a new technology tool comes out, you ask, how does this change the landscape of writing and writing instruction? That's what I think we are doing. The same way, if we found a new piece by Foucault, wouldn't that be cool? Maybe what does this mean? Well, if we find this really new technology, what does that mean? We don't think that way about it as much. We just say, well, maybe I can use it. So I think that's a problem. So what I'm going to do in this talk is I'm going to talk a little bit about the Writing at CSU project. I'm going to talk about the results of an early study that we did in the 1990s that led us eventually to change the way we thought about the role of technology in supporting writing instruction. We're going to talk a little bit about the design of the writing studio, which came out of that rethinking process. And then I'm going to talk about a study we've been doing over the last 3 years to look at the impact of a course management system or a writing environment on writing and teaching that's going on in a whole bunch of classrooms. There's 1,200 students involved in this so far. So here's Writing at CSU. Just a quick snapshot. Some of you guys might have been to this website. It's down from its height of 61,000 pages to 35,000 pages. We get about 4 million visits a year. There have been so far since we started it in 1992. Really. We started thinking about it in 1990. Building on earlier work that Kate Keeper and Don Rodriguez had done with the electronic writing system at CSU, which was really the first functional thing that looked like an online writing system. And some conceptual work that Richard Dunn and Chris North had done at Carnegie Mellon in 1987. They actually laid out what looks like an online writing center in 1986, 87, but they couldn't get it funded. Too bad. Two really good proposals. And when you look at the kinds of collaboration we're talking about, really visionary. It's very similar to what's going on with a lot of the better ones right now. So we built on that work and started thinking about 1990. We've got to go into 92. We've had creative people contribute to it since then, either for pay or by volunteering in these pieces or working with them. We have right now just 52,000 accounts in the writing studio. 24,000 of them have logged in within the last year. They've logged in an average of 38 times. We have, in the last 2 years, more than 2,000 classes from over 90 institutions. So it's a big open access kind of thing. So here's how it started out. In 1992, there was a wide area network application. We basically went around campus and installed this Windows program on all of our computers. For most, on about 400 computers. And every time we rolled out a new change, we had to go to each of those computers. We had writing guides, which are like little textbooks, or writing activities, which are like build and kill activities. We had annotated model graphs. We had some video-based speaking guides, which were really cool. You guys see somebody doing the speech back in 1993? Video. We had email and chat consultation with the Writing Center. You could send them a draft. You could just ask them a question. You could actually get online and chat to them. So we had a lot of good stuff going on. It was all local area network. It wasn't on the web at all. And it looked pretty good. It looked like this. Familiar to anybody? We had all kinds of good stuff for online writing center. There are a lot of them. We have a writing guide using this software. There's a little bit like HyperCard, a little bit like Offerware. It was called asymmetric toolbooks. They're actually still around. Afterward, just went out. They're not supporting them anymore. And so you had a navigation bar and right and all sorts of stuff going on. It's kind of fun. We had, by 1996, decided that we didn't like updating 400 computers on a regular basis. So we went to the web and we lost all kinds of the rich text ability that we had before. Because it just, you couldn't do anything on the web, and you had tables and images. And tables were really debatable. We actually used frames, and we got yelled at a lot. People were using frames. Yeah, I have no idea what people didn't like it. By 1998, we become the biggest site on the web for this. And by 1999, we realized that we reinvented the wheel. And I was depressed. I went into rehab. I was really bummed. The reason that we realized we had not done what we really set out to do, which was to find a really effective way of supporting credit construction, was that we did this transition study. We had asked a pretty simple question. As part of the funding that we got to establish the online writing center, we did all kinds of studies. We did a year of baseline studies of writing across the entire university. We did a national study of writing in specific engineering disciplines. We did a workplace study where we interviewed people at the leading high-tech firms. Really, a lot of good stuff. And actually, as a result of all that year of study, we came back and rethought our approach to the whole online writing center back in 1992-93. But we did this, and we finally published a book on the study in 98, and we were really going, no, something's not working right here. So this study, we asked a simple question. What happens if you teach the same class at 10 o'clock in a traditional classroom and at 11 o'clock in a computer classroom? What are the differences for you, for the students, for how you teach, for their outcomes, those kinds of things? So we followed 4 teachers. We have so much data on this. It's incredible. A lot of qualitative stuff and some quantitative. And it was fascinating. We interviewed about 37, 38 students at the beginning and end of each semester. We did all kinds of things. What we found was that students in the computer support classroom interacted more frequently with their teachers in classrooms. What's interesting is that the teachers, so if you're a teacher, you were initiating the same amount of discussions with students in both sides. But in the computer classroom, the students were asking you questions. So up to 3 times as much interaction between students and teachers in the computer classroom. These are computer classrooms where the computers are arranged around the outside of the room. You've got a seminar table in the middle, and you want to talk face to face. Just on wheelchairs, we go, circle up, which works really well. And so the students interacted more frequently. That was good. They were much more likely to talk during class with their classmates about writing. So in the traditional class, we go to and we observe and take notes. In the traditional classroom, about 2/3 or 3/4 of the talk between students was about parties and fraternity issues and things like that. In the writing class, in the computer classrooms, they were like talking about writing. It was odd. They would actually ask each other, "What do you think about this draft?" Because they'd be sitting next to each other typing, and they'd ask questions. That was interesting. They revised more extensively and more frequently, probably because they had access to computers, but also because the classes were set up a little differently. Even though they were taught by the same teacher, the teachers taught them slightly differently, or slightly different. And what was really fascinating is that they seemed more confident about their writing ability over the course of the semester. It actually increased, whereas in the traditional classrooms, it stayed about the same. So it's pretty fascinating. Yes. The teachers told us things. So a lot of the voices of the transition study book is the voices of teachers. And one of the teachers told us, the contact I have with students is more closely related. She's talking about what's going on in the computer classroom as opposed to the traditional classroom. It's more closely related to the writing project that they're working on, and a lot of it's more student solicited. They're the ones that determine when they want me to help them with their writing rather than me saying in the traditional classroom, okay, on Tuesday and Wednesday, we're going to have conferences. She says, I have conferences with my students continuously in the computer classroom. And that's true. It might be 90 seconds, it might be a minute, it might be 3 minutes. You can probably, I found personally, I get more done in one of those 3-minute conversations than I get done in half an hour where they have to come in and kind of warm up because they're already writing. So, I've got it. So this person says, I'm more of an organizer in the regular classroom, I'm more of a facilitator in the computer classroom. And when I facilitate, I'll let the students determine when they need me. In the regular classroom, I have to predetermine how the students need me, and then I have to make them work, or make that work. In the computer classroom, I let them determine what they need from me. these teachers talk very much about letting the students control things. And then, oh, I don't think I went too far. This is, yeah. Sorry, I got all mixed up. I would say I do a better job of making my students more personally responsible for figuring things out on their own in computer classrooms. How many of you guys teach in a computer classroom?
We're housed.
Yeah.
We're a wireless class campus.
Same thing. Yeah, so you've got laptops in the classroom, you're doing all. We did another study of net reporting on this topic of using laptops. So it's something you never get sticking to. So if I give them a chance to write, discuss a little bit with their peers around them, do you have any questions? Is there anything you feel like we need to talk about and move on? They're more responsible, I'd say, for saying, this is the problem, I don't understand this, I don't know what's going on. And one teacher was telling us that they feel like they're in control, they have to talk like I'm doing right now, as opposed to letting things go on and just have a conversation. And when people would come into the classroom, they'd say it's very chaotic, and yet a lot of things are getting done. It was really interesting. So the implications of the transition study was that the material presence of computers shapes teaching and learning and writing classes by changing the roles of teachers and students. In terms of interaction, teacher roles, writing during class, the students actually resisted writing during class in the traditional classroom and more or less embraced it in the computer classroom. They would say things like, I feel more professional in the computer classroom. I can write. It seems like I'm doing a smart thing. That was interesting. So this led us to think about a new approach. We started characterizing the differences between these two classrooms in terms of the difference between an art studio and an art history class. In these classes, we said writing in the traditional classes was an object of study as opposed to in the computer classroom something that was done. You know, you can talk about it, you can rectify it, you say here's writing, and then you go off to your room and you type in a traditional classroom, but in the computer classroom you might actually learn something, do something, and you get some feedback right away. It's not perfect, but it's good. So instead of asking, so here's what we did. Because we thought about this as a writing studio, we started thinking, okay, well, what does that mean? We looked back at what we've been doing with writing at CSU up to that point. We said, you know, we've been thinking about it as supporting a writing classroom or supporting a writing center. What we really should be thinking about is how we support student writers in the act of composing. So if you start thinking about it that way, that leads you to ask different questions about what technology can do or should do. Right. So we asked the same question: how can we support student writers in the act of composing? That was a fundamental breakthrough for me. So instead of saying we can build an online writing center, we can build an online classroom, I started saying, how can we build something that students can use as they learn to write and as they write? So that led us to the writing studio. It's an instructional writing environment. Now, in the 1980s, I told you before about all this doing research on collaboration and using graphics on that. Those were writing environments. What they left out was any sort of instruction. They always focused on professional writers. They didn't focus very much on students. They didn't think about students, to tell you the truth. There was a few that did. But not that many. So we created an instructional writing environment that has composing tools, you know, like an online word processor, collaboration tools so you can commenting and sharing your drafts with other people, asking for feedback, communication tools, email, discussion forums, eventually blogs, or things like that. Peer and instructor feedback tools, and actually in our class system that we developed after a while. You can go to the class roster and you can see all the students' work online and just comment on it right there. They're never just do it. And then instructional materials, which we had many of already developed in the writing CSU project. So this is what it looked like. Wasn't it attractive? This is our first alpha, really, in 2001. Mackenzie Fogelson was the grad student who was working with me then, and she was very interested in creating a studio room. We thought about a studio, we'd have rooms. You know, a room for a class, or a room for an area, poetry, fiction, whatever. So this was the informative writing room. And it had some stuff in there. I won't bore you, because it really wasn't very functional or good looking. A year later, we came up with something a little simpler, and more like this. And it was still part of the writing, it was separate from the writing at CSU's site, even though it was part of it. It wasn't really, those two weren't merged, it's like they were in one or whatever the combo. By 2004, we still had them separated out, but it got a little more attractive, I think. Maybe a little bit. And those are all pictures from my motorcycle trips. And then this is what it looks like today, which is pretty boring still, except when you get inside. Now that we've merged Writing Studio and Writing CSU are the same. You only log in to see stuff that you need to log in for if you need to use your account, otherwise it's all right. So it seems to work pretty well. So you come here, you can log in, but you don't even have to worry about a login page. You just go somewhere and it says, oh, you need to be logged in, just send you the login page. Kind of normal behavior. You log in, you go to a writing page. You can customize this and make it look however you want. This is mine. Very exciting. You see, we've got all of these writing tools, a personal calendar, things that I like to look at, the classes I teach, writing blocks, things like that. On my work. This is one of our class pages. This is the Zen skin. I like it. I spent a lot of time on that one. It's not really all that functional, but I like it. I mean, you just go over here, you click on one of these things, and you go to calendar, syllabus, forms, etc. We started out without doing anything for classes. We were using another course management system. We built this whole writing environment around the writer, with absolutely nothing to do with classes. But around 2005, 2004, the people that had been doing classroom management system for us, syllabus, went out of business. And so we said, well, maybe we can just integrate some of that functionality into here. And that's taken off to be the point where it's turned into we've got our built-in course management system. But the student stuff started first. We wanted writing for students. If you go to a class, you can click on the classmates page. This is a class from the University of California at Irvine that Linda Haas teaches. That's not Linda Haas. So you put any that you want. And when you click on this, you can go to a page and you can see their published blogs and published portfolios, things that they shared with that class, and other classes that you share with them, and things like that. You can ask them for comments. It's kind of nice. This is a class project wiki that we just revised a couple of weeks ago. And this is something built by students. And you just go in there and you can customize it and add new pages and all kinds of stuff. So it's a simpler way to do a wiki than some of the things you've seen out there. It's actually built into the class. And you can make comments on it and read comments. This is a writing club, which is like a class page for people who don't want to take the class. So we have people working on this for student groups or just a writing group might be out there. And they just put up their drafts and share them with each other. Or they just use a calendar and say when we're meeting next. This is our blogging tool. I'm just showing mostly my stuff instead of others. You can customize this as well. An e-portfolio tool is the same kind of thing. You can create all the pages. There are different layouts. And you can choose your colors and backgrounds. And you can completely control the layout of the text on the page. It's just a rich text editor. It's like using a word processor. Put in any links you want. Put in images. We have a drafting tool, and you can expand. We just replaced this particular one. So some of those just like it. But you can expand this into a full screen editor, just like a word processing tool. This is a bibliography tool you guys probably familiar with. And this is how you make a comment. You just make a comment. And then we have the drill and kill stuff still. And we have guides. We have something like 100 guides. And then another 30 teaching guides. They're like little online textbooks. Some of them were really big. We had one that was like 500 pages before we cut it down to 7. That was an argument. We've got some really good stuff on argument. We've got some very nice pieces up here. Just if you want to check things out. We even have things like on content analysis for grad students. Turns out it's the #2 rated thing on Google for content analysis. So I keep getting these emails from people in Brazil or Northern Ireland asking questions about content analysis. So we had developed this thing and integrated it, and it was going pretty well. And we started thinking, maybe we should do another study, because after all, we're academics. We live for studies. And we asked this question. So we wanted to kind of help transitions too, because we're very different. What happens when the course management system becomes a virtual part of the writing classroom? And so we set this thing up, and we had basically, so far we've looked at 16 teachers in about 60 classrooms and 1,200 students. And we've done a similar kind of thing. We're looking at their actual use of the studio. We're interviewing people. We've got lots of artifacts. What we did, we broke it out over 3 years. In the first year, we just looked at a range of experience. So what happens, how does an inexperienced teacher use it? How does an experienced teacher who's never used a course management system before use it? How does an experienced teacher who's used the system before use it? And what are the implications for their students? How do their students use it and react to it? The second year, we focused on classroom setting. We looked at computer classroom versus traditional classroom. Same teacher again, teaching the same courses. Well, not in all cases same courses, but teaching courses in both settings during that semester. And then this year, we're looking at the impact of professional development activities. I think this is the single most important thing we're doing in this study. Because what we learned from the first 2 years is that it's teacher attitude and experience that's dictating how it's being used. We asked the question, what would happen if we actually helped people understand the motivation and theory behind this system, as opposed to simply turning them loose and saying, oh, use it. And so we've actually talked about rationale. We've gotten together professional development activities. They've shared their ideas with each other and asked questions. We've explained all kinds of things, and they've asked us, why did you do it this way? And what can you do with this? And it's amazing. So what we're finding out is that you can't just give people a system. You actually have to help them understand how it might possibly fit into their worldview as a teacher. That's working out really well. So our preliminary findings so far, it's related to the use of the studio and how students use it, how much they use it, is really related to the instructor's teaching experience and to their experience using course management systems. Because you could have a teacher who's very open to using this, who's a brand new teacher, and like most brand new teachers, they're going to be struggling. They'll have the same problems that teachers have the first time they start teaching. Maybe a little too much lecture, maybe not having seen enough essays, maybe not anticipating student difficulties, the kind of stuff you get only through experience. And so with a combination of experience and also experience using systems like this, that we found that student use so far directly reflects how much and how well the teacher integrates the system in the class. So some of them didn't even know they had it. I mean, they did, but student attitudes varied a lot in our interviews, and we've interviewed a lot of students so far. I think we're getting up around 75. Some see it largely as an information dissemination tool. I love the fact that I have a calendar and I can see my assignments. And others are actually using it as a writing tool. So and it's been interesting. We asked them, why are you using it as a writing tool? And they say they're planning to use it through the rest of their time at the school, which is interesting. Finally, many teachers tend to view the studio and all technology, for that matter, as the handout. As I said at the beginning, most of our teachers have this attitude that technology is something that comes after us. And we can use it maybe if it works within our acceptable framework. So, finally, as I said before, professional development changes attitudes and use by teachers as well as students. So we're starting to see after one semester with professional development, the students really were using it in richer and more useful ways when the teacher was starting to integrate it more. And we have it's great because there's a variation in how much these teachers are actually integrating it into the class. So and they'll say things in their interviews that give us a pretty good idea of why they do this versus that. And then we can track that to see how the students use it. So we can tell an interesting story. And it might even be true as well. So let me conclude. We have some conclusions. We should think carefully about the relationship between teaching goals and information technology. As I said at the beginning, I think it isn't teaching goals first and technology solely in the service of the teaching goals. I think there's an interaction there. I mean, the World Wide Web's a great example. If anything's changed the way we think about reading and writing, it's got to be the web. So your students will tell you, I don't write very much, and they're thinking they write, what is it, 2 essays a semester, or 5 essays a semester, or whatever. They don't write that much. But they write 500 emails, they make about 150 MySpace comments, they chat, and they IM, and they text constantly. That's not writing, right? We should interrogate the metaphors that inform the design of learning tools and environments. As I said before, if you think you're building something for a writing class, that's very different than thinking you're building something for a student writer. And I think most of our stuff has been built for writing classes. Classroom minutes, look at WebCT. What's the metaphor that informs WebCT? It's the lecture classroom with Blackboard. It's the lecture classroom. They have quizzes, they have exams, they have lecture notes. Look at all of the words that are in those systems. They're not consistent with a writing class, for one thing. Even our course management system, which has a lot of the same tools, has a different language to discuss things. We have class materials, not lecture notes. And it's a real different kind of way of thinking of it. I think the metaphors we use, even at very subtle levels, changes the way we think about something and allows us to think about this in a particular way. We can talk about this more because I think it's an issue. I think we need to continue to study these interactions between curriculum, technology, students and teachers, like we've been doing with this. We find more every time we look at it, we find more and learning things about professional development programs. Now, probably the biggest contribution that's going to come out of our study is recommendations for professional development related to technology. So far, that's where I see where this study is actually making a contribution. And we can do all the theoretical stuff. Do students who get D's and F's communicate more or less frequently than students who get A's and B's? We can answer questions like that because we'll have a lot of data, but that's not really where I think the strength of the study is. And I think we should examine the effects of professional development programs on this technology. So it's not just the fact that we should develop them, but what's the best way to develop them? So I think we're going to follow up beyond this study saying, if we do it this way, should we have it more instructor driven? Should we have a set curriculum? How do we invest them in it? Things like that. So I'm pretty curious about that. And I think that's it. Questions, comments?
I remember back in the late 80s, the newspaper reporter came to my class, and it was much like the room you described, and they gave the students a task, and they all started writing, and I was doing the 30-second conference, and it just didn't look like teaching.
No.
And I remember she interviewed a lot of the students, and she paid attention. She probably caught on a little bit. She said, well, this is kind of like the newsrooms where, we don't even have cubicles, it's all open, and I want to know, I need to find out who the mayor of Birmingham is, and so on. But it was very foreign to her. And part of that, I think, at that time was due to the newness of the computers. I mean, we were teaching word processing to students. So I fast forward to today, and my perception is, for lots of reasons, and some of them very good, people are leery of that studio model. That is, it's one thing if you've got the freestanding computer hooked to a dot matrix printer. It's another thing if you've got, wireless to, Heath Ledger, Voyeurs.com. I'm sure that site exists today. And so it's like, well, rather than, we can't just like turn the students loose to produce in a studio because we don't trust what will happen. So I guess the ill-framed question in this is how do you know, what are the features of a studio class environment? How do you know when it's being productive? And what do you do when it doesn't seem to be?
I think the quickest way to determine if it's not being productive is if the students and the teacher are talking. And if the students are talking to each other about things other than writing. Those are the two things that would give it away from the right away. This is not a productive environment. They're in there checking their email, they're looking at the MySpace page, they're texting or whatever they're doing. They're not really dealing with writing issues related to their class. I think that's what gives it away. And you can see it. If you're walking around that classroom and you're talking to students and they're asking you to come over and there's 3 kids raising their hands saying, I'll get over to you, I'll get over to you, then it looks like it's quite successful. But if I've not in these classes where a teacher kind of walks around for a little while and sits down, checks her email. That's not a successful classroom. When you're constantly walking around and helping students out, it's like that. For me, it's like that notion of the art teacher walking up and saying, if you just held your brush this way, that would really change what you're doing, and you try it, but you're right. Well, same thing. Introduction's not working, or I don't know how to integrate this. I got this quote. What do I do? Something like that. I mean, how long does it take to explain that to somebody? Not very long. Well, imagine the value of getting the answer and figuring it out. You actually remember. You have to learn by doing it. So I think the first thing I would look for is if you cannot work, when you go to the teachers after talking to them. And the teachers may not do stuff with their computer, and I don't think it's a successful model. If the students are constantly just writing, then it's like it's a drafting class. That's terrible. I don't think you want to turn it to be strictly about drafting. I mean, I think the most successful classrooms based on this model are based on virtual. It's almost like I grew up Catholic. Okay? You know, there's certain things you do at certain times in the service. It's very important. Well, for me, you walk into class and you sit down at the computer and you check out the assignment for the day that gets the class started, and you start writing. I would always have a daily assignment. It would be write in, you'd either be posting in response to a reading for that day, or you'd be working on something, or you'd be sharing a draft with somebody and working on it. So for the first 5 minutes of class, people would be writing and doing something. What was weird is that people show up about 5 to 10 minutes early so they can get started on their daily. So they walk into class, you get this whole thing, this expectation that they're working. And then when I walk into class, I can hand out any materials I've collected from them if I haven't done electronically, or I can walk up and talk to somebody if I have a question and want to talk to them. They're all busy writing. It's usually pretty quiet when you talk, a couple of them are talking to each other, but it's not your typical chatter going on in class. So I like that ritual of doing that, and then I always pull them together, say circle up, and we get together in a seminar setting, and we talk to each other about what's going on in class. And so it might be a quick set of comments on what's coming up, or it might be a discussion of a key concept, it might be some questions of this, why something just happened. You know, that kind of normal discussion that you have in class. And then after that, I would maybe do one more thing in class. If it was a long block, like an hour and a half class, we might do a couple of things. But I think the most effective classrooms have a pattern that students can anticipate, and they typically do far fewer activities than what goes on in the traditional classroom. Like the traditional classroom, when we look at their syllabus activities for each one of our teachers, they all kept their teacher's guide or a teacher's log, and they reflected on stuff. They might have 5, 6, 7 activities in the class. And in the traditional classroom, or computer classroom, they have 2 or 3 at the most. So they did a lot less, but it was more focused and more engaging. So that's where, you know, I think you really do have to structure that pretty carefully. It's not a free-for-all. I mean, it shouldn't be. I mean, there should be times when you're walking around the room and answering questions, doing all that. But then there's other times when you're doing a mini lecture, or you're having a class discussion. There's times when you're doing peer feedback. There's times when they are drafting. I like to have a drafting time set up after a peer review session. So whether it's face-to-face peer review or online peer review, and then they get together and talk about it some more, they get it, and then immediately they can go and start working on the drafts, which is pretty good. So that's, you know, you want to tie the writing in a functional way. So I do some teachers that would say, well, we're going to have one drafting day a week. Well, why don't you just stay home? You know, get together with a couple other people. What's the point of having a class if all you're going to do is do word processing that you can do at home anyway? So, but the students would like that, because then they'd have to do less work at home. But I think it's important to structure it. I think it's important to really look at that kind of interaction. But yeah, those are in class. We're all figuring it out. That's great. Did you ever do those sort of impromptu? Wait, I've got an idea, everybody. You saw this over here, and I want to go. Yeah, you don't need it in mind. I try not to do that.
So what are some of the implications for professional development that might emerge from this?
From what we've seen so far is you really want to build a community of teachers. We've got a mix of folks who are full-time lecturers, similar to what you guys have here, and then people who teach. We've got one writer who is teaching these professional classes. So we've got a mix of people, but they form a cadre of about 6 people, plus those of us in the study who meet with them, and they're really getting to know each other, and they're asking questions about why did you use an e-portfolio? How did you use an e-portfolio? How do the students react? We ask those kinds of questions. And that's one implication, I think, is building a sense of community within that professional development. It's not like human subjects where you go and you do the online thing, and we're certified to do human research. It's more like, let's get together and talk about it. It's more like a craft seminar class in a sense. The second thing we've learned is that it's really important to give the teachers their own voice. That's not just receiving, that they should have an investment in that program and bring their own ideas to the table and talk about why they're doing things. And I think the third thing is you do need to have some structure. You want to start with some basics, explain what the system is about, what the technology that you're using is capable of, why you made the choice to use this as opposed to 3 other competing products. How you see it fitting into the curriculum. And talking about the curriculum as, it's not just, again, don't make this curriculum separate, that's a given. It's, well, we did this and we think the technology can help us do that. And as the technology develops, we see really should do this. So those are probably the 3 things I would say. Yes?
I'm interested in how sort of disability intersects with some of these technology issues. I mean, there's the obvious problems like web accessibility and existing computer classroom design, but I'm just wondering to what degree you sort of thought about that and incorporated it, and maybe more particularly even incorporated some of the alternative technologies that I've found to be useful for a lot of students, like voice dictation software and some of that, but I know at least I've had a hard time selling it when I'm trying to build my computer.
We haven't really built that in as much for the dictation stuff. We did put in a station in each one of our labs for students with disabilities, so for non-sighted students. The software just stinks. I mean, it's getting better, but what's the one that's used frequently? It's got a very yeah, it's got a terrible name. And
It sounds dangerous.
yeah, okay. But that is so arcane and complicated. I don't know how people can use it. You have to be a genius. So all of our blind students are geniuses, obviously. They're using it, but it's really tough.
My husband's blind and works on an alternative product that is a lot better called
Is it?
GW Micro No Eyes.
Good.
And they're a major competitor to JAWS, and it's so much better.
Good.
So there are other products.
The first time I ever taught a class.
JAWS is terrible.
The first time I ever taught a class at Carnegie Mellon, I showed up. I had been told over the summer that I was a graduate teaching assistant, so I was looking forward to assisting somebody. And I didn't give it much more thought than that. And I came in without a BA. I went straight into the doctoral program. And they told me I was teaching a class, and I went over, and I was like totally freaked out. On top of it, one of my students is blind. So I go, how do I do this? I've got 31 students. I've never taught before. I've had no support. I've got a blind student. He taught me a lot about these issues. He was really helpful back then because he was working incredibly well. It was a ridiculously technologized campus. And he had like IBM supporting him right now. It was great. We've thought about the issues in terms of design of the site overall. We've gotten away from frames, although there still are some of those internal frames here and there. We did an analysis of the whole site, and with 35,000 pages, I was really worried about where we were going to get. It turns out we're doing a lot of things right in terms of alt tags and title tags. We didn't get into the description tags that are useful, but we don't really use those in pictures that much that we need to. It's been a real challenge. We're working with a group on campus right now who is pursuing the Universal Design for Learning, and they've been helpful as well to come over and talk with us about the stuff. So, but it's, it's hit or miss.
Yeah, and if I know for me the trick is not been so much more traditional physical disabilities, but different learning disabilities. In terms of, students feeling more pressured and having to produce something in a small time frame where maybe other students are doing that, or, more sort of textual graphing problems in terms of parsing the text on screen and then general unwillingness to use the mark station in some of those systems.
Yeah. Or students just saying, I don't have a learning disability. We've got a lot of students from your classroom and say, and they're struggling to read. But no, my sister-in-law was one of those students. She's 41 years old now, 42. She finally found out that if she just uses a slightly different color film over the letters, she can read now. She said, reading was cool. She went all the way through college without acknowledging anybody. She's having difficulty. It was just a pain to read. I don't know how she got to read. So, yeah, you see that a lot.
I'm really interested in some of the tangential factors in the success of technology or computer-based classrooms. For example, you talk about teacher attitudes, which I really like, but I'm also considering like physical space.
Yeah.
Did you look at that?
Yeah,
A lot of different
we were really,
spaces?
there's been a lot of debate about how you design computer classrooms. You go with pods, you know, like things start to get like this, you get a group of students talking to each other. You go with the rows. You go with the peripheral thing. You know,
Did you study that? Did you guys look at that at all?
we looked at it, but no, we only had one design in the classroom we were looking at, so it's not something we could tease out. But we certainly talked, we've got a chapter in the book about that issue. And so we looked at the literature on it and talked to other people. I'm not, someone was telling me that Don Rodriguez might have been the person who came up with that peripheral thing. I don't know if that's true. They started their first computer classroom about the same time that you guys, I think it was 85, 86. They had a computer classroom in 81, but it was more like a lab, it wasn't a research classroom. But we think that the peripheral one works the best. The pods breaks up sight lines in the classroom. The line, when you're staring at students like this, you can't tell if they're texting or anything. Don't like that. We had one guy who walked up, big guy, he would just turn on people's computers and they're doing bad things. I worked with Will Hockman at Southern Connecticut State University. He's done some really good things with the laptop classroom. We were talking about laptops. And what he likes about the laptop classroom is you just put the lid down. You know, and that's cool. And you can be in a classroom like this, and people can walk out in the hall, they can go out to the quad, they can hang out in this corner. And so he likes the ergonomics of that because it's so much more flexible. I like the fact that you've got people next to each other. What I hate are the carrels. Those are bad. You want to have it open so that you've got somebody next to you can talk to. I don't like the isolation. I think we really want to get students in each other's faces in a sense, talking to each other. And after a while, they pick out where they want to sit in the room that people are comfortable with. That's good or bad. But, so I think that works well. The other thing is, I like to have a classroom where I'm talking to the students, not fighting with the computers. So getting them around the table really works well for them. You guys have small classes, like 15 students. That's so, yeah, we got very close. If you can get them all around the table, it's so much better. You know, they're looking at each other, they're not distracted by the computer, usually.
Another interesting side about that is having taught both in the peripheral classrooms and in the laptop classroom. In the peripheral classroom, the students will reach over and sort of athletes reach over, documents you can see planning. They're very reluctant to touch somebody else's laptop. So you don't have that kind of interactive collaboration going on. And I haven't figured out, at some point, we need to have more of a programmatic discussion about how do we make that happen.
I was going to say, Eliana and I went to graduate school together in Texas, and they had the CWRL down there, and so we had the pleasure of learning in a bunch of different environments, both around the pod model and also around the periphery. And what I was thinking as you were discussing is that when the machines are present in the room, there is a different feeling about what those machines mean than laptops, because your laptop is your personal belonging, for one, but it is also the interface for lots of your personal life as a young person.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but you were talking about our attitudes toward the technology and understanding what those technologies mean.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a laptop means something so different than a computer owned by a university that is present in the classroom, and so that the interactions with that are, as Eliana said, it's a little bit more like we all own this in the classroom, so people might be willing to switch machines or whatever. Right. But I also think that when there's a slightly more formal sense of the work that happens in that space, and I wish that even though we have very small class sizes, which is lovely, the physical structures of our classrooms are not typically set up for the best ways of doing that. I mean, we have a lot of bolted down road classrooms on this campus, or even if we have a seminar table, it's better really to have them writing this way than this way.
Yeah, you don't want to be writing and looking at something. I think next to each other. Yeah. So if you got a question, you can just turn to the right or turn to the left.
Yeah, so I mean, and then those are just the logistics of it.
I really like what you said about the personal laptop versus the workstation. Will's been doing it with a laptop cartridge. You will in the room, everybody gets their laptop, that laptop, that one.
So it is the universities, but.
Yeah, but what's interesting about what you're saying, though, is a laptop, you tend to think of it as a personal communication tool. And that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it. That's really interesting.
I'm trying to persuade them to stop pushing.
Yeah. Oh, I'm listening. Besides, I am always popping up.
Yeah, no, it's full of, I mean, and it's full of, I don't know if Jennifer Novak, your student who has the slideshow of himself constantly on his laptop.
I have a hockey player in my class. A slideshow of kind of fun with his computer that just runs when he's idle.
Yeah, screens too.
Yeah, but I noted it in the classroom.
You made it
The
public.
computer was closing it.
Okay.
Not running while we're talking.
Do they show him like hammering somebody?
I guess. Yeah, like he was doing well.
I was just in somebody's office and they had their screensaver was a picture of themselves. And I just thought,
I think it's interesting that you bring up, because I think it's true for teachers too, because we have these laptops that we're bringing in and we're moving them in and out of personal spaces. And that does change the dynamic of the conference.
Hey, ever broadcast something you didn't mean to?
And broadcasting it in front of everybody.
yeah.
So,
I like the more fascist approach. No, I don't like that. I remember the fascist approach. Where they've been selling this stuff for a while, where you can, as a teacher, take over anybody's desktop and display it to everybody else on their screen. Ooh, I hate that stuff. But that's interesting.
yes, sir. They're asking them to work out.
Well, I was thinking about the pacing also. Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Because one of the things I think that happens in an active writing classroom, and I'm also trying to be sensitive to students who are working with learning disabilities or just process text differently, there's always going to be pacing issues. That sounds negative, but people are going to work at different paces.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have to keep repeating to my students that there's no normative pace at which these processes will happen. But I don't think that our students really know what to do with themselves, like brain-wise, if they rush to finish a task. And so there's a different set of options when you're in front of a computer than, and I almost feel like one of the things that could be useful to them is for them to know some intellectually stimulating ways of using that time, which without the technology, I guess the option is for them to just sit there. But that was coming up recently for me, just like if some people are working intensively and you don't want to be like, okay, 2/3 of the class are done with this task, now you people have to hurry up because that's not right. I don't know. Little thoughts about that.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Or are they racing through it because they want to say they're done and check their email or IM?
Occasionally, yeah.
Distracting technological thinking out there.
But it's so fascinating how our own rhythms of writers have changed. And I think of how I write in probably about 10 or 15-minute chunks. And then I'm checking email and I'm off task for 2 or 3 minutes and then back on. And I've been habituated as a writer to sit down and write for hours. And if I'm somebody who's grown up in a very different environment than that, I like the way you put that. Well, how do you use the time when you're, quote, not on task in a way that is not disruptive or disrespectful and is still productive? And I don't think we wrestle at all well with that.
You put them in a writing environment as opposed to just a word process. Then they can look at other things. They can do things. You can say, if you're done early, why don't you check your source, do some more searching for sources, or check out some of the blogs and see what you can find.
I'm going to invite us to have a glass of wine, have some snacks here, and talk with Mike. I was going to introduce, although she jetted out, this was Amy Vidali, who's at CU Denver, that you might know, and you're Amy's colleague. Would you introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Miranda Egger.
Okay. Well, welcome to DU. Are there any other off-campus visitors here? I wanted to make sure. So I say howdy to them, and
I'm sorry, may I introduce myself?
Sure.
My name is Liang Han, a visiting scholar in the School of International Studies. I just come here, last Sunday. I was very lucky to contact Anne, and she is very kind to introduce me to come here. And if you don't mind, I want to ask you a question. Yes, I have to say, first of all, I get new knowledge from this lecture. We seldom teach writing by using computers in the classroom because I think it's very now limited on the basis of the technology. I have to say, everybody should at least have one laptop, right? If we have to do this. But anyhow, when we are teaching writing, we only maybe use computers by emailing, right? But I have a question just now. You mentioned that when we are teaching the writing, we should not only now emphasize the teaching way, but also emphasize the feedback from the students, how to support the students to be a good writer. But I have been wondering for at least several years, but I'm teaching English for the non-English major graduate students. That is a conflict case or common class, including writing, reading, and listening, and something like that. Right, but also has something to do with the writing. And then I'm wondering that when we are evaluate now our writing, which way or which side should we emphasize more? That is now the result of the students' writing or the results of the teacher's teaching approach. Because people are widely recognized or considered as different people. Maybe somebody born to be a good writer. Even though the teachers try, not including me, we are trying to promote the students to be good writers. Maybe they could not write in a good way. So I feel wondering, I'm very puzzling about this.
I think the best thing to do is to identify what you want students to be able to accomplish.
Yeah.
So if you want them to be able to write, say, a good business letter, or if you want them to write a reflective essay about a piece of literature or whatever, you say, what would an acceptable essay of this type or document of this type look like?
Yeah.
And you judge their progress against that. Now, that's not to say that you don't say, well, you're starting over here and you're starting here, so you obviously have much farther to go. You can take that into account, and I think most teachers do. But still, you judge against the standard of this is an acceptable level of performance, this is a superior level of performance, and you judge them in that way. So you try to idealize what would an effective essay look like, given the fact that an essay could be several different ways, hundreds of different ways.
So,
but still,
yeah.
it makes a point, it elaborates on that point with subpoints, it has evidence and reasoning, those kinds of things. We look for those kinds of things generally. And then in terms of what the students do when they're giving each other feedback, you structure the feedback so that it's built around the idea of what the essay would look like if it was effectively done. Have you done the following things, or how effective are you at introducing the idea? Have you provided evidence to support the points that you're making, and things like that. So I tend to do those kinds of things more than focusing on this student just is never going to be a good writer, or the student is really going to have to struggle because they're very weak in this area. I try not to do that. I try to say, this is an acceptable level of performance, how close they can come.
Yeah. It's quite target-oriented. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and please join me in thanking Mike and help.
Hi, I'm Linda.